Hi folks, welcome back to Murthy Finance Academy. All right, today we're jumping right into a crisis that's got the entire globe on hold. On March 5th, 2026, the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical energy artery, was completely shut down.
Now, you'd think this is a military problem, right? I mean, that's what all the big institutions are modeling. But they're missing the real story. The U.S. Navy absolutely dominates the seas. They've got 3 carrier strike groups sitting right there. And yet, the strait is commercially closed. Not one tanker has passed through. So, what is really going on?
The answer, and this is wild, is a total paradigm shift in global power. We're talking about a mechanism that very few people have ever even modeled. This isn't your typical military blockade. This is actuarial warfare.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of this. The crucial thing to understand is that a financial kill switch was flipped. And it wasn't flipped by a government or a military, but by the private insurance market.
Here's how it all went down, like a series of dominoes. When the conflict kicked off, the reinsurance companies, these are the folks who insure the insurers, were suddenly staring down the barrel of unlimited risk. Think about it. One single supertanker getting destroyed could wipe out the entire global war risk market's revenue for the year. So under these really strict EU capital rules, they had no choice. They pulled their war risk coverage. That left the primary insurers, the P&I clubs, totally exposed. So what did they do? They issued 72-hour cancellation notices. And just like that, poof, global shipping in the Gulf just stopped.
And that, right there, perfectly illustrates the core idea of actuarial warfare. It's this crazy new reality where a few private reinsurance desks, run by actuaries, the people who calculate financial risk for a living, can suddenly wield more control over a vital choke point than an entire military fleet.
I mean, this is a fundamental change in how the world works. The old model was all about physical control. You'd use navies, minesweepers, whatever it took to force a channel open. But the new model? It's all about financial viability. A ship just can't sail if it's not insured. It's that simple. Or if the insurance premium costs more than the cargo's even worth, well, it's not going anywhere.
A great way to think about this is to stop thinking about military history and start thinking about the 2008 financial crisis. Remember that? The market for mortgage debt didn't just freeze because all the loans went bad. It froze because nobody could afford the cost of figuring out which loans were good and which were bad. The cost of verification got too high. Well, here, the verification cost is the war risk insurance premium, and it has shot up to an impossibly high level, freezing the entire shipping market.
Okay, so that's the core mechanism. But as if that wasn't bad enough, the situation is being made exponentially worse by 3 other massive crises that are all feeding into each other and acting as powerful amplifiers.
Let's break down how these things are stacking up. We've got something called the counterparty paradox, a really scary math problem with missiles, and a deeply, deeply unsettling nuclear situation.
So first up, the counterparty paradox. The initial military strikes actually worked. They took out Iran's central leadership. But here's the twist. That shattered their command structure into 31 different autonomous provincial commands. So if you're an insurance company, who do you even talk to? Who can you negotiate with for safe passage? The answer is nobody. There's no single person who can guarantee a ship won't get hit.
Second, we have what's being called the interceptor arithmetic. And folks, the math here is just brutal. Iran can crank out hundreds of cheap drones and missiles every month. Meanwhile, to shoot them down, the U.S. and its allies are using interceptors that cost millions of dollars apiece, and they can only make a handful of them in the same amount of time. You see the problem.
And that math creates what's being called a temporal trap. At the rate they're firing these interceptors, critical defensive missile stocks could be gone in a matter of weeks. That's way, way faster than the insurance market could ever hope to regain confidence. The military clock is just ticking much, much faster than the financial one.
And finally, the third amplifier, and this one is terrifying. We have a nuclear crisis in the making. For decades, a religious ruling, a fatwa, prevented Iran from building nuclear weapons. Well, that fatwa died with the supreme leader. His successor doesn't have the authority to reissue it, and that leaves a huge stockpile of highly enriched uranium without its main constraint.
So how does all this tie back to the financial markets? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The market is pricing this whole thing like it's a short-term military squabble. But all the mechanisms we just walked through show that it's actually a deep, long-term structural crisis.
The market is betting this whole thing will be over in a few weeks, but when you look at how long it actually takes to rebuild the risk market,
solve that counterparty problem, and restock all those missiles, you're not talking weeks, you're talking months, maybe even years. That is a gigantic mismatch.
You see, the market is operating on three completely flawed beliefs. They believe U.S. military power can just force the strait open. They believe government insurance programs can just step in. And they believe global reserves can just absorb the shock. All three of these ideas have been proven totally wrong in just the first few days of this crisis.
And let's not forget the pure physical reality of the situation. The existing pipelines that could bypass the strait, they can't handle anywhere near the volume. We're talking about an irresolvable deficit of over 14 million barrels of oil trapped inside the Gulf. Every single day, there's just nowhere for it to go.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Well, what this crisis has really done is pull back the curtain on a completely new layer of global power. A new substrate of power.
The theory behind this is something called regulatory chokepoint theory. The idea is pretty simple. In any system that's built on finance, the real chokepoint isn't the physical location, like a narrow strait. It's the place where the money needed to verify and insure risk is at its thinnest. In this case, that place was the London reinsurance market.
So if you remember one thing from all of this, let it be this. The flow of global energy is now governed less by admirals and more by actuaries. The incredible power to open and close the world's most vital economic arteries now rests on the balance sheets of a few reinsurance syndicates.
And that leaves us with a very provocative and, frankly, unsettling final thought. We just saw this mechanism demonstrated in the Strait of Hormuz. But if balance sheets, not battleships, are the new tool of control, where could this be applied next? The Taiwan Strait, the undersea data cables that power the internet, global food supply chains? The implications are absolutely profound. If you like the video, please do like, share, subscribe to Murthy Finance Academy.